Welcome to Laughs from the Past. I'm Jake Storielli. If you've been listening lately, I've been opening these episodes with an accent from the time period and the location. This is from early America, the 1800s, and I could not find an accent that fit this, so I came up with an accent. And please don't turn this off if you're turned off by this accent, because I could see myself being turned off by this accent. In September 1806, Meriwether Lewis, along with William Clark, received a hero's welcome as he entered St. Louis. Lewis and Clark had just returned from their epic journey across an unknown continent, a journey in which they had overcome Indians, grizzlies, mosquitoes, illness, and nurse starvation. At 33, Lewis was a national hero. Just 3 years later, he was dead. Shirt twice in a small cabin in Tennessee wilderness. Who Shirt Him has been one of the longest lingering murder mysteries in American history. I'm so sorry, and I'm Jake Storielli, and this is Laughs from the Past.
Who shirt him?
You were pretty shocked by how many words I could mix in an ER accent.
I'm gonna throw up. I ate a big dinner. Who shirt him? He's dirt.
That accent was the accent from a movie scene where you'd have the main character listening to someone talk like that, and they'd be looking around the room for someone else to be like, what the hell is he doing?
Is anyone else hearing this accent?
Please tell me someone else is hearing this accent.
Lewis was shirt. Shirt dirt. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I was laughing also. I love the ERs.
Right.
But I also was laughing. We're in an Airbnb.
Right.
And there's a main house.
Sure.
And they have no idea what we're doing. And they're
Right.
like, how are your guests this week? Like,
Yeah.
well, they're cool, but one night they just screamed history books at each other.
They were just hissing in a weird accent from across.
I don't know.
from
Maybe
across
they're
the
doing
way.
like a play and they were trying to get in character.
If you weren't able to hear any of those words, the story was Meriwether Lewis of Lewis and Clark murdered.
Yeah, and they don't know how he died.
1806. Sounds like it was a Gurn. Gurn shirt.
Who shirt him? Shirt dirt.
Meriwether Lewis, a shirt with a Gurn. Excuse me?
Is anyone else hearing how this guy talks?
Son, start over.
All right. Well, thank you for joining Laughs from the Past. My name's Jimmy. We got Jake with you. You know the deal. We're in season 3, episode whatever. And we're live together sitting on the same couch. Usually we're through a computer screen. And we have a story here about Meriwether Lewis. I didn't know Meriwether Lewis. I didn't know his first name was Meriwether. I didn't know that he died 3 months after the journey. I feel like I should have known that. I didn't know that.
I think it's 3 years.
3 years.
3
But
years.
I didn't know he died at a young
Right.
age. I had no idea about this murder mystery. And
It's a huge
also,
American hero.
yes.
All-time American hero.
Yeah, it's also interesting that he got like a hero's welcome. Like people applauded that back then. They're like, this guy just he just walked around and came back. Like, how did their story get told so quick that by the time they came back, they had a hero's welcome? That's kind of confusing.
Yeah, just being able to leave town and return was an accomplishment.
Yeah, it's weird.
Interesting.
Anyway, I tweeted out which one people wanted us to do first: Lewis and Clark, Pocahontas, or Amelia Earhart. And out of those 3, this is the only one I didn't read the full chapter because I read 3 years later he was shot dead twice, and no one knows who shot him. It's one of the biggest murder mysteries in American history. And I said, I want to experience this one together with you because I know nothing.
Okay.
Amelia Earhart, I knew enough where I wasn't going to be a fresh take.
Right.
And Pocahontas, I knew enough. This one, I know nothing of this. So I thought it'd be interesting if we both had fresh takes after I read it.
Yeah, my Lewis and Clark knowledge is, I think my sister was in a play in elementary school, and they sang a song that was like, Lewis and Clark, Clark and Lewis. That's all I know.
Who wrote that song?
It's a good song, right?
John Boy and Jake.
Jake and John Boy. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that should be the new John Boy and Jake radio intro.
The Jake stands can get that going. And this crew's Sacagawea, right?
Oh, yeah. Sacagawea is in here, yeah. She had a baby. She had a Barbara.
Are Lewis and Clark both dudes?
Yep.
Okay. Because, I mean, Earhart, Pocahontas, Lewis and Clark, if you throw Sacagawea in there, we got three powerful female characters involved.
Yeah, it's true.
It's good. 2019. I'm happy about it.
All right. Sounds good. So we're going to get into this.
Right.
I was going to do another precursor. There's supposed to be a HBO miniseries all about Lewis and Clark coming out where Casey Affleck's playing one of them. I've been so interested, but I think it's like 5 years now and it hasn't come out. So something must have went wrong.
Okay.
Casey Affleck became a creep in Hollywood, so maybe they backed out.
That's true.
Yep.
Did he Me Too, or was he just creep? He's creep too?
I think I have no idea. I don't want to talk out of turn.
Right.
But I think he's a creep jerk.
Okay.
All right. If there was an official inquest into Lewis's death, we don't know of it.
Okay.
The records of Maury County, Tennessee, where the shooting occurred, have been lost. But we do know that Thomas Jefferson took it upon himself to investigate the death personally. I think that means he hired investigators.
Maybe. Times were different.
Thomas Jefferson's like, let me in this crime scene.
TJF was like,
that right there.
I'm one of the few learned folks in these parts.
That's a gunshot wound. Mark it down.
Did I hear Gernschert?
Gernschert? Jefferson's interest was not surprising. Lewis had grown up on a plantation only 8 or 9 miles from Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home. Jefferson had plucked Lewis from the army to serve as his private secretary, and the president had then chosen him to lead the expedition across the continent. How's that? Here I am thinking Lewis earned his way. Turns out the president was his neighbor.
Yeah, I was just going to say, should I be really impressed by that? Because I am.
That Jefferson was like, that Lewis Clark wrote to the president that we used to be, hey, dude, we used to live down the street from each other. Remember me? Can you pull me out of the military and I just hang out with you?
I guess I'm not impressed by that aspect. I guess I'm just impressed that, we hear stories now, and it'll be like, oh, 2 athletes grew up in the same neighborhood. And you're like, okay, that's cool. We just did the Yogi Berra and that other Gargliola or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Two catchers grew up together, 2 MLB catchers. Again, in a time period when it was easier for 2 MLB catchers to grow up in the same neighborhood. And it's almost easier. If you just got a lazy scout that was in St. Louis and he saw both of them, he's like, yeah, these 2 kids are good. Give them a shot.
Happens a decent amount. Chris Bryant, Bryce Harper.
Right. I mean, we're seeing it now with AAU teams and stuff like that. I mean,
Greg Bird, Kevin Gossman.
That's making it easier. But I think, I don't know. I guess that just really shocks me that 2 early big time names in American history grew up in the same hood in the late 1700s.
After investigating his friend's death, Jefferson concluded it was suicide. The story he pieced together went as follows. Turn the page. A nice picture. After returning to St. Louis, that's funny. After returning to St. Louis, Lewis was appointed governor of Upper Louisiana. Alas, it turned out this was a man who coped better in the actual wilderness than in the political jungle. Early in his term, Lewis reversed some of the Indian policies of his chief assistant, Territorial Secretary Frederick Bates. and Bates worked from then on to undermine Lewis's authority, you got me going, authority and popularity. Once Jefferson left office, Lewis also managed to alienate his bosses in Washington, in particular, Secretary of War William Eustis. I think I know where this is going.
Okay.
They were trying to like get rid of the Indians and just murder them all.
Right.
And go to war with the Indians.
That was popular back then.
that was
It's one of the biggest
name of the
hobbies.
game.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of them savages.
Hell yes.
And Lewis was like, actually, I just traveled through the Great Plains.
Right.
I met a lot of really nice savages, and I met a lot of horrible white people.
You're depicting, I think, the good guy in this story in a kind of a bad light.
And he was like,
I've seen these servitors.
Yeah, like, down with the savages. And Lewis was like, oh, actually, they're pretty good people.
I like your nerdy voice.
It's not nerdy. It's how Lewis Clark sounded.
It's kind of close there. You doing an impression of my Aaron Boone impression.
Well, anyway, Lewis Clark, Lewis is just like, don't do it.
Okay.
That's mean. Hey, you know all those plans you have to kill all those Native Americans?
Servitors.
I think that's kind of mean.
Right.
And Washington had enough, so they killed him. That's my early theory.
Okay.
Early theory. Back to the book. Matters came to a head when Lewis paid $500 more than Eustis had authorized to return an Indian chief to his tribe. Oh, so an Indian chief was being held for ransom, and they're like, all right, Lewis, you got $500. You got $100 to pay to get him. What?
Okay.
I don't get that. The chief had come east with Lewis on the expedition's return trip, and Lewis felt responsible for getting him back home. Eustis, however, saw this as an example of Lewis's disregard for his higher authority. In addition, he was convinced there was a conflict of interest involved, since the company Lewis had contracted with to escort the chief home was a company in which Lewis's brother had invested. Oh, okay.
Okay.
That makes sense. So Lewis goes on this journey. He meets this Indian chief. Like, come back to St. Louis with me, dude. It's awesome. There's food. There's
You're going to
music.
love it.
You're going to love it. And they bring him back, and then the chief's like, okay, thank you, Mr. Lewis, but I think I'm going to go back to my people now. Am I allowed to go back to my people now, please? I don't have.
Is it going to be okay? Because it seems like everyone in town hall wants to kill me.
Yeah, and I don't really have the funds to get there
Right.
or know how.
Right.
Because you kind of just took me here.
Two biggest ways of getting back.
And so Lewis goes to Eustis and is like, hey, this is my good friend that I met, Chief.
Right.
He wants to go home. And you say, all right, you got $100 to get him home. And Lewis is like, that's not going to cut it. So he spent $600 to get him home, $500 more than he was allowed.
Okay.
And he paid, the company he paid.
Good money.
The company he paid to do it was his brother's company.
Right.
So
nepotism.
And that's how Lewis got involved. His best friend hired him to do everything.
Right.
So like nepotism was the name of the game for him.
I mean, yeah. Still is, some people would say.
Oh, it is. So now I'm thinking Eustis' gripe wasn't that bad. He's like, well, I gave you an amount of money and you overspent by $500 and I'm your boss.
Right. What?
You gave the money to your brother's company that you're an investor in?
Yeah.
I'm with Eustis.
Yeah.
To make matters worse, Lewis was deeply in debt. When Eustis refused to pay Lewis's expenses, Lewis was near bankruptcy. And he had to borrow some money from Clark, his partner in Discovery, to get by. Wow, Clark must have hated Lewis. I just spent 5 years with you, dude, and it was fun. I'll give you all my money now. In September of 1809, the much vexed Lewis set off for Washington to make his case to Eustis in person. He just wanted another trip to, like, walk somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm a walking man.
You got wanderlust.
Along the way, Lewis stopped at Fort Pickering, near what is now Memphis. That's not that far.
Can I call time out?
Yeah.
What was stopping at forts?
So forts were, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So there's cow towns set up,
Right.
and they were called forts. So basically, the cowboys had a bunch of cows that they would hurdle, right?
Sure.
And they just needed like landmarks along the way,
Right.
like so like a day's ride. Okay,
You go from here to here.
yeah, and there would be just buildings, right?
Okay.
And you could tie up your cattle. You could put them in the middle, and then when cattle ranching got really big and buffalo skinning got really big, cow towns popped up, and those forts, like Fort Dodge,
Right.
became Dodge City. So it was just a fort with just some putty houses for people that stopped at, and then they went on their way.
Okay.
Then people were like, oh shit, this is getting really big. If we put like a restaurant here, everyone's going to buy our food.
We do more stuff.
If we put a bar here and some hookers and some gambling,
Yep.
all the cowboys are going to want to come here.
Get that.
And the Civil War just ended, and people were like, I just had to fight in that. I didn't want to fight in that. Like, I just want to go west and do my own thing. So there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of outlaws. So forts were like little towns along the way, like Fort Dodge,
Okay.
Wichita. Like every like big city, in the Midwest had like
Did you call them havens? Were you
No.
necessarily safe or no?
No. You had walls around you.
You had
so
a chance to rest.
Yeah, and
okay.
hurdle up your
Okay.
cattle and stuff.
I'm there.
Okay. It's a good question.
Thank you.
So he stopped at Fort which is now in Memphis. That's not that far, I feel like. He was in St. Louis already. Fort Pickering, near what is now Memphis. By this time, Lewis was more than vexed. According to the fort's commander, Captain Gilbert Russell, he was in a state of derangement. Russell also reported that members of Lewis's crew had told him that Lewis had made 2 attempts at suicide and that he'd taken upon himself to keep Lewis in the fort's sick bay. So this was like a military fort. Those existed as well.
Okay.
And they might have been military forts where they kept people to fight the
Why
Indians.
was Lewis so depressed?
He achieved his life goal too early, maybe.
Oh, okay. I like that.
And now he's into a land of politics, and he's, again, I just like walking places.
Yeah.
I don't like passing bills to kill people.
Discovery. He's already
Yeah.
discovered it all.
He's discovered himself too early, some might say. So he's in a state of depression. In about 6 days, according to Russell, Lewis's condition improved, and he again set off for Washington, this time accompanied...
So essentially a week later, Lewis is like, not going to kill myself anymore. And they said, all right, punch it.
Go to what? Get that talk with Eustace.
All right. Morale booster.
This time accompanied by Major James Neely, the United States agent to the Chickasaw Nation. For what happened next, during the last 23 days of Lewis's life, we are mostly dependent on Neely's report. According to Neely, Lewis's condition again deteriorated, and he again appeared deranged in the mind. That was in quotes.
Whoa.
On October 9th, 2 of their horses escaped, and Lewis proceeded onto a small inn while Neely stayed behind to track down the horses. So Lewis set those horses free.
To get rid of that guy. To
Yeah.
get rid of McNeely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he was all about setting things free.
Yeah. He was trying to set himself free to God, and then he set the horses free.
Yep. From this point on, Jefferson and future historians could no longer rely on Neely's own eyewitness report. Instead, we can only depend on the story which Neely had to reconstruct from the words of the innkeeper, Mrs. Grinder, because he stayed with her. According to Mrs. Grinder, it's a funny name.
Grinder.
Mrs. Grinder. Lewis arrived there deranged. Not wanting to be around him, Mr. Grinder's like, this sucks. In the middle of nowhere, and the famous Lewis comes in and he sucks.
Suicidal Lewis comes in.
Yeah, well, I discovered Oregon and fucking
Yeah.
it was cool, but now my life sucks.
Miss Sacagawea so much.
Clark doesn't talk to me anymore. Not wanting to be around him, she gave him the house and slept in another one nearby. She gave up her house?
I kind of love that.
Along with Lewis and Neely's servants. They had servants on this trip?
Yeah, dude, they were big time. These are grade A celebrities in the 1800s.
At about 3 a.m, she heard 2 pistol shots. Went to Lewis's room and found he'd shot himself in the head and a little below the chest. Lewis's last words, according to Grinder, were, "I have done the business of my good servant. Give me some water." How did he shoot himself in the head and miss so badly he could talk?
It's a really good point. And yet, did he go... I mean, was the head miss so bad he went head chest, or did he go chest head? I'm assuming he went chest, kind of flunked the dunk a little bit.
It was like, damn, this is a slow death.
He assumed the heart was right in the middle, so he went middle. Probably went chest bone, and there was some shrapnel. It was bad, but it wasn't dead bad. And then he went head. How'd he screw that up? Where'd he go?
I don't know.
Mouth?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, hey, let's say this. Something smells funny. That's already pretty fucking weird.
And it's your lady.
Oh.
This then was the story which Jefferson believed. You sap, Jefferson.
Yeah.
You're just going to go believing everyone? As further evidence of Lewis's suicidal tendencies, Jefferson recalled that Lewis had, from early life, been subject to hypochondriac affections, as had his father and other family members. Well, if that's true, why'd you pull him out of the army to be your perfect personal servant and then go send him on a mission to explore the great Wild West?
Across the country, yeah.
Jefferson concluded that during his western expedition, the constant exertion, which that required of all the faculties of body and mind, suspended these distressing occupations. But back in St. Louis, these affections had returned, and he was in a paroxysm of one of these. What? I think, to sum it up, Lewis needed a busy mind.
Right.
Otherwise, he just worried about everything that was wrong with him.
Yeah.
I think I'm the same way.
Sure.
I now relate to
Get
Lewis.
it, Lewis.
I'm with you.
I'm there.
He committed suicide. Another who knew Lewis well also appeared unsurprised on being told that he committed suicide. William Clark reacted to the news by saying, I fear the weight of his mind has overcome him." Why did he say, I fear and then I fear the weight of his mind? What does I fear mean?
Maybe it was...
I
don't know exactly how it's written, but how I'm picturing it is this was one of the first beat reporters, and they were reporting it, and they put the mic in his face, and he kind of did the I fear and then he caught
it's not
himself.
O-H.
He did, yeah.
It's capital O.
Right,
That's
but
all.
they used to say words with O's and apostrophes and shit.
Yeah.
I think he was saying something and he caught himself. He was probably a little emotional. And then he's like, okay, I'm talking to someone that's going to write this down. This is the death of Lewis, the 1800s Penn and Teller. This is Penn dying. And he's saying...
No, it sounds like Clark was Penn.
Okay. Teller's dead.
Sounds like Lewis was much
Suicidal Teller.
Yeah.
And basically, I think he was looking to say in the nicest way, this dude's a miserable fuck. He was going to kill himself. Right?
I fear the weight of his mind has overcome him.
Is that not the nicest 1800s way to say, this dude lost it?
It's a little too cavalier for me.
Okay. But that's what I'm saying. I think that's a generic press conference answer for the 1800s.
Okay. With the prestige of the presidency behind it, the verdict of suicide seemed settled. Now, from the start, there were doubters.
Right.
I'm a doubter. The bullet hole...
Still are. The shooting weird. I'll tell you... Know what's my weirdest wild card right now? Do you have what's your wild card? We both don't like the double shooting.
The bullet wounds don't make sense.
We think that's bizarre. What else is jumping off to you currently as odd?
That they gave him the whole house.
Okay. Interesting. I can kind of see that.
What do you have?
angle.
But I don't really have much. What do you have?
the biggest thing. Dude, the President of the United States is involved in this.
Yeah, so it goes up to the top.
I think we've got some early, like, private president office. Like, this could be, you know that when the president gets sworn
He
in?
gets that book of secrets.
Yeah. I think this is chapter 2.
So you think Jefferson ordered the hit?
I think potentially.
Okay, here we go.
I think Jefferson's in on it in some way. I don't fully know the dynamic, but I think he's just a total wild card that's getting passed over in this.
Okay. Yet, from the start, there were doubters. Grinder's cabin lay on the Natchez Trace, a trail already well known for the presence of bandits who wouldn't hesitate to rob and kill well-to-do travelers. About $120 that Lewis had with him when he left Fort Pickering was never found. Could not one of the Trace's notorious bandits have killed Lewis? I don't like that theory.
Notorious Bandits, there's a chance.
Yeah. That was your first band name, right?
No.
Just you and a drum machine
Decent.
screaming in the
Decent
basement?
name.
Nor was Grinder an entirely credible witness. Of course not. She's Mrs. Grinder.
Who was?
Yeah, right? Who was? Over the years, she recounted the story to a number of different visitors, and these stories differed in many details. Oh, if you're going to tell visitors that come to your house, like they just come on through,
Right.
you're not going to tell the same story every time. And you don't have bad...
Yeah, you are.
No, you don't have bad
In the
intention.
1800s?
At sometimes you're going to tell them, like, yeah, I heard a scream. And other times, like, the fox ran in and started dancing.
Oh, okay. Like word for word, you're not.
You're going to
say the
entertain
same story.
yourself.
But that's where I was. I was gonna say you're gonna only tell the same story, because that way when passerbys happen to run into you, they say, "Oh, did you say at Miss Lady's house?" And they'll say, "Yeah, they told us the fox dancing story." And they're like, "Yeah, they told us the fox dancing story. We love the milk part." And they're like, "I think we missed the milk part.
I must have tuned out.
I almost had too much seaweed that night."
Doo-ska-boot, doo-doo. In some versions, Grinder immediately accused the servants. In others, not. In some, she was alone. In others, her children were present. In some, she gave Lewis the water he asked for. In others, she refused. In some, she described Lewis as crawling around and then heading over to the trace, while in others, he stayed in the cabin. In one version, Lewis's dying words became, "I am no coward, but I am so strong, so hard to die. I am no coward, but I am strong, so hard to die."
What are motives?
I don't know yet. Besides the
Okay.
bandits, we don't know yet. But those mix-ups are not what we were talking about. Those are pretty brutal mix-ups. Giving him the water or not, different last words.
Different last words is something you kind of got to have down.
Yeah. Some historians have suspected that Grinder couldn't keep her story straight because she was covering up her role in Lewis's murder. Or perhaps the role of her husband. Well,
Okay.
others have been more sympathetic. After all, finding a world-famous explorer dead in your home would fluster most anyone. And Grinder was just a poor and uneducated innkeeper. Okay, let's not be rude to her.
But no, that is where, like, the story part isn't fully a thing for me, because, like, this is just a woman that lived out in the woods. And then every 2 weeks, someone's coming up to her and being like, "So how did he die?" And she's like, "I don't remember fucking anything. I know nothing."
Do you need more butter?
I mean, think about the list of things she actually knew.
Sun comes up in the morning.
Like weather,
Yep.
some basic meals,
Yeah, she was a good cook, for sure.
clothing. Is that it?
I mean, I think we're being a little mean, but she might have known anything.
I don't know.
Neely, too, had come under suspicion, as have Lewis's and Neely's servants. We know little about any of them, other than that Jefferson accepted their innocence, and in the case of Lewis's servant, Jefferson interviewed him at the White House. Ultimately, no eyewitnesses, unless Neely or Grinder were lying. We can never know for sure whether Lewis was murdered or committed suicide. So, like Jefferson, historians have looked beyond the grinder's cabin and into Lewis's psyche. And many, in contrast to Jefferson, concluded that Lewis would not have killed himself. How, they asked, could a man who had conquered the wilderness be so distraught by a few political and financial problems? In his
Oh, that's pretty ironic nowadays.
yeah. In his 1947 dual biography of Lewis and Clark, John Bakeless wrote, "Though the government's financial methods drive men to distraction, they rarely drive them to suicide."
Rarely.
Rarely. That's because, like, you could live off not that much money back then.
Right.
Like car insurance, needing a car, life insurance, needing, like, bills. Like you could live without bills back then. You just needed a horse.
No, it's kind of interesting when there's the Laughs from the Past podcast in the year 3080.
Mm-hmm.
They'll look back and be like, yo, 2007, people didn't even have unlimited texting plans.
They had to pay per text.
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking back at that now already.
I am. I'm still not happy. But, yeah, they didn't have much going on.
Yeah. Though the government's financial methods drive men to distraction, they rarely drive them to suicide. If they did, the streets of Washington would be littered with corpses. Whoa. And in a 1965 biography of Lewis, Richard Dillon wrote, "If ever there is such a person in the anti-suicide type, it was Meriwether Lewis. By temperament, he was a fighter, not a quitter." For many of Lewis's biographers, especially his earlier ones, suicide just didn't make sense. It was the wrong ending to the epic tale they told. No, whatever.
Sure.
Alas, Lewis was not bound by the need for an appropriately heroic ending to his life. Beset by debt and depression and perhaps disease, he may have seen no alternative to suicide. Perhaps he found it easier to escape Indians and grizzlies than his own despair. Perhaps, with his great adventure in the past, he saw nothing of promise in the future. Perhaps, even as he exhibited great courage during his expedition, he was courting death. Though Clark was certainly no coward, it was Lewis who unnecessarily climbed a dangerous cliff and nearly fell from it. It was Lewis who wandered off alone into country he knew was filled with grizzlies. It was Lewis who, with only 2 companions, went to meet the Shoshone, who had never before seen white people, and then, with only 3 others, ventured into the land of the Blackfeet, whom he had been warned were hostile. Was he defying death or embracing it? Did the same forces, however incompletely we understand them, drive him across the continent and then to his death? We can't know for sure the answer to these questions. Much about Lewis's death remains a mystery. But those who knew him best, Jefferson and Clark, concluded he committed suicide, and in the absence of more compelling evidence to the contrary, that seems the most likely solution. That is the end of the tale. What a beautiful summary that was there.
You and I both know what happened.
He killed himself.
He so killed himself.
This is the easiest thing in
But
the world.
let's check off some of the alternate theories just to do it. Or what are the alternate theories? Why would the innkeeper or her husband kill him?
I was looking for
any motive.
Any motive, conspiracy. I was looking for anything. The best they had was like some hostiles. The notorious bandits came through on the one night he was there.
Like, okay, random bandits is something we chalk up because we have no clue. Like, how often did that happen? Was that just like, coyote picked off another kid and the bandits came through and killed someone? Huh? Tuesdays.
No, I don't think it was that often.
Literally the best legitimate theory I can come up with, motive-wise, would be a Thomas Jefferson hit.
Mm-hmm.
Because Lewis was like more famous than him. Like going back to that neighborhood stuff.
If the gunshots weren't so weird, It's the easiest case in the entire world.
The gunshots are a little odd.
If the gunshots weren't weird and Mrs. Grinder wasn't a dumb-a-dum.
Right?
If Mrs. Grinder could just have the memory of a human being and not a goldfish, then this case would be nothing. He killed himself. He was an adrenaline junkie, and he ran out of reasons to be an adrenaline junkie. So he got sad and depressed.
Here we go.
He was boxed in. He was a caged bird, and he needed to be free.
Here we go. So, Lewis had anxiety.
He had a lot of things going on.
He was wondering what this life was. That's the reason he walked across the country looking to find what it's all about.
Where are the Grizzlies at? I want to go meet them.
He had a sincere wanderlust / what does it all mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing he wasn't very religious,
no.
which we didn't hear much about, but it feels attached.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, this guy at age 33 or whatever felt he had seen everything he could see in this world. There was nothing left for him, and he was on the outs. That's it.
He was depressed.
And the other thing that I think is not the cherry on top, but I think what closes this case up is that I think that this whole mystery part is fabricated because he was an American hero. Because I think if you let the sheep hear that an American hero killed himself, I mean, you've got a potential like mass suicide thing going on.
I pulled up the Wikipedia, and they say they pulled up the body. Later on, they pulled up the body, and the guy in 1848, they pulled up the body, and that guy says it seems to be more probable that he died by the hands of an assassin. So that dude was like, "Nah, he didn't kill himself." But like, why? Give me more reasoning.
We still have zero motive.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if the Wikipedia has any more motive, but it doesn't. In 2008, the Department of the Interior approved the exhumation, but rescinded that decision in 2010 after the change in administrations, stating that the decision is final. Yeah, like in 2008, like let's not spend money to dig up his body.
Right.
I mean, we're interested, but not like we're okay to let this one linger.
Like interested.
Then a historian wrote a rebuttal and was like, nah, it wasn't a robbery. He killed himself.
I'll say this. I think they could make a good Netflix doc on this.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Like, I think you could go TJ. I think you could go Bandits. I think you could go Old Lady. I think you could go, how about this? What if you go third person from him and TJ's neck of the woods, and there's a third person that thought he should have been Lewis, and he thought Lewis stole his whole life thunder.
Oh, just because he was friends with Jefferson, he got to go on this trip.
Like he thought that should have been him.
Yeah. The Wikipedia says that there was also a slash to his throat. That would change the whole thing.
That would change a lot. Or he was just trying to kill himself in every way.
He sounds like he was like just kept failing, like slash his throat, and like, how the fuck does this work? This didn't go. Shoots himself in the belly, like, oh man, I got to bleed out.
Bullet right in the heart, shoots his belly button.
I got to bleed out for 2 hours. This sucks. Tries to shoot himself in the head, but he's all like shaky hand because he's bleeding out now with a cut throat and the belly, and like misses his head a little bit.
And again, I hate to depict this lady that lived in the woods without an education in the 1800s in a bad light, and I see people being offended by that, but think about what this person was. Like, what if this is a person with a good soul and they're trying to say a nice thing? Like this woman is trying to be like, oh my God, this dude just killed himself on my property. He's an American hero. Should I say like I got in there at the last second and he said some final words to try to like keep his story going, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. This guy killed himself.
Yeah,
what are we doing?
I'm fully in that he killed himself.
If you have any leads on anything else it could be, let us know.
Let us know.
But I got nothing.
But I think it was sure shot. He shirt himself dirt. Shirt himself dirt.
Meriwether Lewis, dirt.
All right, so
33 years old.
We're coming in short. Like I think I don't know. We're not at an hour.
Live
we're
there.
at 45 minutes. But I'm going to put in the very early attempts at Jake's accent, a little behind the scenes before we cut out for you because it was a good time. Thank you for listening. As always, we appreciate it. We will be back next Tuesday.
Should I do it like an illiterate in the hills of St. Louis?
Can you do that?
It was September 1806 in Meriwether Lewis. Yes! It was September 1806, Meriwether Lewis, along with William Clark, received a hero's welcome as he entered St. Louis. Lewis and Clark had just learned from their epic journey across an unknown continent, a journey during which they had overcome Indians.
Overcome's pretty good.
You don't hear that accent a ton in American history.
It's one guy.
It's one guy. It's the guy reading the story.
Do you have to do it? Overcome.
Hopefully the people like that. The accent. Okay, I'm gonna do a whole intro.